Hello, everyone. I'm Tammy Davis. I am coming to you today because I've been in an awful lot of conversations with regards to histamine, and there's a lot of people dealing with histamine imbalance, histamine intolerance, autoimmune disorders, you name it. And unfortunately, the range of how it affects people is pretty extreme. Some people don't even realize that it's occurring. They have the minor discomforts, whereas other people are just chronically ridden with severe issues. Now, and this is the reason why I want to talk about histamine, because, in fact, I was sitting with an Amish man the other day, and he says, well, why don't we just get rid of histamine? Well, histamine is part of our immune system. It is actually it is the chemical, it's the chemistry of the immune system. In fact, all of our neurotransmitters interact on some level with the immune system, but the histamine is what is released in the presence of foreign invaders, bacteria, viruses, and so on. So even in repair of tissue, when you break a bone or you cut yourself or you burn yourself, histamine is released because this is how the body protects itself and then proceeds to repair itself. So histamine is a very important chemical. So getting rid of it isn't exactly on the to-do list. But that said, what is required is helping the body to regulate this chemical and coming about it from a very different perspective. Now, I actually I'm posting a blog post later today, that actually covers this very same subject. And it came about because I was sitting with a family. The 28-year-old young man was Down syndrome. Again, this was actually another Amish family. Now, I do work with people across the board around the globe. So I don't just work primarily with Amish, but when I sit with them and they ask very intriguing questions. So it's very helpful because it prompts me to be able to investigate and explore even further. And again, I recently have gotten to work with people outside of the Amish community that are also dealing with histamine issues. So the combination, if you will, is what inspired me to actually move forward with additional research and being able to compose both this video and, again, the blog post that's going up later. So in sitting with this 28-year-old Down syndrome boy and his family, his mother more or less indicated that he never received a diagnosis. And interestingly enough, when I see, it's not to say, with no disrespect whatsoever, you can identify Down syndrome rather easily because of the chromosomes. The way the chromosomes are laid out, they have a very distinct feature that's recognizable. So for her to tell me that she didn't have a diagnosis, but she thought he was autistic, I thought was interesting. Nonetheless, she indicated to me that he was actually nonverbal, although he was very good and very adept at speaking with his hands and signing. So there was no problem with communication. He just didn't have the words, although he did grunt an awful lot. Her statement to me was that she started him on a gluten-free diet, and in such has seen a change in his ability to speak. And I didn't explore this because I was actually there working with somebody else, so I didn't have the opportunity to kind of dig around and see where he was before, because I had no problem communicating with him, although, like I said, he didn't utter one word. He is still nonverbal. He does grunt and he does sign. So we had a great time talking. But there again, the other thing that she indicated is she has a son who has Crohn's. Her sister-in-law, these boys' aunt, also has rheumatoid arthritis, and that's actually who I was there to work with. So the combination, if you will, Crohn's is an autoimmune disorder. RA is an autoimmune disorder. Now, Down syndrome is not autoimmune. But the fact that gluten-free actually seems to free up some of his symptoms was something for me to kind of play around with. Now, as you know, I am a very big fan of plants and nature, and I refuse to believe that what we've been given to in supply, we have an abundance of resources to help us, whether it be our intelligence in creating pharmaceuticals and or the nature around us. And so my love for plants tells me that there's more going on here than needing to be casein and gluten-free, because we know that's also very common within the autistic community. We recommend this population cut out gluten. We know this for a fact with celiac. I mean, it's just, it's become so popular of going gluten-free. And I even have gone so far as to find information on statements saying that gluten has no nutritional value. There's no value to gluten. There's no value to casein. And that is the milk protein. Gluten is obviously a grain protein. Now, gluten has very many forms. There's not just one gluten. Gluten is a protein, a group of proteins that is found in so it changes within grains. And I'm beginning to believe that people have less of a tolerance to casein than they do to lactose. I don't believe so much as a lactose intolerance as it is a casein intolerance. And here's why. As I was digging around, like I said, I do not believe that we have these foods available to us to nourish ourselves, and then at the same time, these foods are bad for us. If you've been following me at all, you actually would know that I do believe in a consciousness, that there is a vital force within all plants, all nature, within ourselves. And in fact, back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, scientists were even confirming that there was a vital force within plants. It wasn't until the discovery of urea that organic chemistry was born, and they didn't go out so far as to say they had taken the place of the vital force, but that theory kind of went quiet. And I don't want to get into that in this video. I'm actually going to make another video here shortly on that particular topic. But the point of this is that there is something within these plants and within nature that sources us. We are, and so I refuse to believe that gluten and casein are bad, that our bodies are not equipped to be able to deal with these, is really what I'm trying to say. If there's a nutritional value to them, that's not my desire to prove. My desire to prove is that we have the ability to break these phytonutrients down and either discard them or break them down into secondary metabolites, in which case then we might be able to use them. I don't know. I haven't gone that far. I may actually get that far here shortly, and that will be added to my blog post. So, but I just want to say that that was my belief, and so that was my hypotheses. Therefore, I went on a search and a hunt for the information, and lo and behold, I actually found that there is a gene that we have that is specific to both gluten and casein metabolism. That tells me that a couple of things. Either we can have a variation, a genetic adaptation on that particular gene that prevents us from being able to break that down, or more importantly, when I looked into it even further with regards to how scientists would try and activate that gene, what I found interesting, because you're probably thinking, well, they don't, because they don't even know this exists, and I'm telling you they do. But they're not looking to activate the gene, they're looking to inhibit the gene. And I thought that was very interesting, because in the inhibition of the gluten and casein, and mind you, this very same gene that is used for gluten and casein metabolism, adaptations on that gene are also been linked to rheumatoid arthritis. So there you have it. But there's a bigger picture to this. what I'm trying to say is the way science is currently looking at this is they're trying to inhibit that gene for the support of diabetes type 2. Now, diabetes type 2 is also would also be considered an autoimmune disorder. Diabetes type 1 is considered an autoimmune. Now, you might think that diabetes type 2 wouldn't be, but I tend to disagree because there is histamine involved, and you have an inability to break down carbohydrates and sugars properly, so now you have diabetes. And diabetes is also hormonally related. And this is why this is important, because the way researchers are finding to inhibit this particular gene that breaks down gluten and casein is through the activation of the angiotensin receptor. Angiotensin is a hormone that is used in the regulation of blood pressure. So what they're doing is they're trying to activate that particular gene in order to inhibit. Now, I don't really care what scientists are doing other than to know that, because the way my mind works is that little relationship right there. If they've learned that angiotensin receptor, the activation of that receptor inhibits the breakdown of casein and gluten, or it inhibits the function of that gene, is what I want to say. So if we know that the activation of a hormone receptor inhibits the function of another gene, that right there tells you how we are wired in nature. So therefore there's a purpose to that, right? Okay, that and this goes back to what I've said countless times before, that our own chemistry is designed to activate and deactivate various genes within our system. This occurs every single second that we are alive and breathing. So our bodies are wired to do this. We are equipped to do this. And so what they've learned is the activation of that particular receptor deactivates the function of this gene. What purpose that serves in nature, I don't want to even begin to guess, but that is what goes on. And so what they're doing medically is trying to, like I said, this is being applied to diabetes type 2, and I didn't follow that path. I was more intrigued by the fact that here we have evidence of one affecting the other just naturally. And so that tells me also that if that particular hormonal gene is on receptor is activated 100% of the time and never turns itself off, that it's constantly taking hormones, it's consistently deactivating the other gene. Therefore, you now have a gluten and casein intolerance, okay? You're going to have sensitivity to gluten and casein. Now, where this gets even more interesting is if our body is not able to break down carbohydrates, proteins, and fat, those macronutrients properly, you have larger molecules floating throughout the system. Here comes histamine, because what happens? We have two aspects to our immune system. We have the innate, which protects us from the immediate threats of bacteria and viruses, and then we have the adaptive portion of our immune system that pumps out antibodies. And so now and the two actually have to work together. And in this case, when you have larger molecules floating around the system that haven't been broken down so that the cells can assimilate them properly, you have foreign bodies floating around throughout the system, and now antibodies are going to be released. Did somebody say histamine? Okay, so now you actually have histamine firing, and you are now having what's considered an autoimmune reaction, because your body is trying to get rid of these carbohydrates, fats, or proteins, primarily in this case proteins, that it doesn't recognize, and you've developed a sensitivity. Over a course of time, you now have the advancement of health issues. You have the advancement of what looks to be like a histamine intolerance. Depending on the rest of your genomics, wherever else you've got adaptations within your genetic system, is going to be what you're going to get. It's how it's going to manifest in any sort of health condition. You may have a series of symptoms and not have a diagnosis. Therefore, now you have what's considered a histamine imbalance, histamine intolerance, estrogen sensitivity. These are all, we have a category of we have a collection of symptoms that have not been attached to a diagnosis just yet. We haven't been masterful in coming up with a name for anything new, other than, but you do have autoimmune dysfunction, and you do have chemical imbalances that are causing extraordinary amounts of discomfort and fear in a lot of people, because the higher the sensitivity levels grow, because your body is just not breaking down these macronutrients properly, your sensitivity to food increases, and you become more and more limited in what you're able to eat. And in turn, what happens is the entire autonomic nervous system becomes out of balance, and the upset just continues. The chemistry is all the same. We can look at these specific genes, and we can take these genetic tests and go, do I have adaptations on that gene? I'm going to tell you straight up, those genetic tests are not providing you with accurate answers, because it is virtually impossible to tell which ones are problematic until the symptoms arise. So if you are having food sensitivities, my recommendation at that point is to get on board with a good digestive system protocol. Digestion occurs on two levels. It occurs in the GI tract, and then it occurs on the cellular level. But on the cellular level, it doesn't matter until you can actually get it broken down in the GI. Therefore, digestive enzymes. I've had this question come up before, whether or not somebody should be taking hydrochloric acid. That is very specific to the individual. Not everybody needs to be taking hydrochloric acid, but I will tell you this, more than likely, everybody needs to be taking a digestive enzyme, and you want to be taking one that has protease in it. That's protease. You need to have that protein in there, that enzyme in there. So on a good protocol of digestive enzymes, a protocol of quercetin. I've had this question come up. People say that it doesn't do them any good. They don't notice any benefit. I'm going to tell you that you got to start with it, and you got to stick with it. Quercetin actually stabilizes mast cells. Aside from regulating histamine receptors, it actually helps to stabilize mast cells, which is more important. So getting on those two at the very least. Magnesium glycinate 400 is another good supplement to be taking, because again, you are actually helping to stabilize the mast cells. Now, I could make oil suggestions, but those are going to be futile at this point, because how all of this is manifesting in the body and what health conditions are arising is so unique that the oil suggestions cannot be the same for everyone. So at the very level, you want to be doing, like I say, digestive enzymes. It wouldn't hurt you to actually include a digestive enzyme and a probiotic, but the digestive enzyme needs to contain protease. You want magnesium glycinate 400. You can double the dose in that, because magnesium, and the reason I don't normally like to suggest a lot of supplements, because when it doesn't come from a food source, it's questionable at best, because you've got all the additives and fillers in it. Taking magnesium and calcium in supplement form is oftentimes counterintuitive, because they compete for assimilation on a cellular level. That said, magnesium in this case does compete with calcium, and it is a calcium blocker. So you can actually block calcium uptake. Get calcium in your food. You want a good food source, whether it be raw dairy, chia seeds, hemp seeds, raw cacao. These are all good sources of magnesium and calcium that'll be assimilated. But the extra magnesium glycinate, and it's a glycinate that's very important, will actually block the uptake of calcium, in which case it helps to calm the system, and again works with the stabilization of mast cells, and then again the quercetin. So those three are very important. There's another way of going about doing this, which is the conversion of dopamine into norepinephrine, but that has got to be done a lot more with oils, and again that depends on what you have, what you're presenting with, before I can make any of those suggestions. But I really wanted to allow you to hear that histamine problems are most of our problems. Most of us have an issue with histamine. It just depends on how it's manifesting in your system, what health condition you have, whether it be an autoimmune disorder, cancer, food sensitivities, allergies, rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, like I said, it can be, the list is endless and how this is going to show up in your system. Diabetes, high blood pressure. These are all very, very important because all of these produce inflammation. And so these are all indicative of a histamine imbalance. And so really correcting the neuroendocrine system is what's most important. As I was saying earlier, taking these genetic tests to find out which gene is not functioning isn't really going to do you any good. You're just spending money, and if really what you want to do is to find other family, it's fun. It's a fun way of doing genealogy. Don't get me wrong. I've done it. But the test results that come from these reports that are being produced cannot give you an accurate reading as to which genes are causing problems. You get the green, the yellow, and the red squares that show you either homozygous or heterozygous, or a green, which is no adaptations. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those green ones aren't problematic. They may be open up. They may be active and fully functional, and they're not supposed to be. So it's really difficult to tell. So again, the symptoms, I hate to say, the symptoms are what we pay attention to and how we work with the body. But really correcting the digestive system is the most important piece, and then at that point, helping the cells utilize the nutrients assimilate them on a cellular level is where the oils come in, and the pairing of these two is incredibly vital. And healing the gut, you can heal the gut. There's all kinds of topics out there about how to heal the gut with regards to leaky gut. Bone broth is another one. Quercetin will do this. So that is the beginning. As far as how this is showing up and how to work specifically with your body, that's something that I can help you do on a private individual basis. As far as any additional suggestions, I will tell you this, though, less is definitely more. And if you begin to balance the neuroendocrine system, that's how I want to close this one. Instead of looking at the genes, you will be worlds ahead of everyone else who's actually trying to affect their body on a cell receptor level. If you're taking medications, everything that I'm saying here is incredibly important, and the inclusion of essential oils is even just as important. But there again, personal instruction is really where it comes down to, because there are contraindications, there are interactions. And like I say, we already know that our body will activate certain genes in order to inhibit others. This is happening all the time. And so these medications are very specific in the way they target our genes and our receptors. So understanding the mechanism of action of the medication is imperative before you start pairing it with anything else, such as oils and herbs. You have to understand where this is going. It's not just about taking St. John's wort or kava kava or not drinking grapefruit juice. It becomes even more important than that. Because again, every chemical affects us on a cellular level. It affects our genes, activating and inactivating. And this may sound very complicated, but if you actually know what your system is currently doing, and with a little bit of, second set of eyes and ears, you can get the guidance that you need. But beginning with the digestive system is where it's at, because from there, your body can begin to break down the macronutrients. It can actually break it down to where the body can actually use it. Okay, so if you're not doing that, There's no point in including oils. I'm going to tell you that straight up. If you're not actually working with the digestive system, there is no point in using the oils. And this goes for any age. This goes for young children all the way up to the elderly. It doesn't make any difference how old you are at this point, at this stage of the game. Digestive system, digestive issues, digestive health is an absolute necessary, because then from there, once the body can break down the carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, then the histamine doesn't get released as much, and you can actually assimilate those nutrients on a cellular level better, and at which point you no longer have an autoimmune reaction, and you can actually better produce your hormones and your neurotransmitters. This is why the immune system, the neurotransmitters, and the hormones are directly linked to the gut health. So that said, again, digestive health, I'm sorry that I don't mean to be beating a dead horse, but digestive health is imperative so that your body can actually break down the carbohydrates, the proteins, and the fats more effectively so that the cells can take them in and produce the chemistry that you need to help reset your mind and actually help stabilize the mental emotional body, and at the same time reduce the amount of histamine that's being released, therefore reducing your histamine intolerance. Now again, there are other genes that are involved with regards to histamine metabolism and histamine deactivation, but through the oils you can actually get that. You can actually help affect that. So but again, the digestive system is where it's at, because if you don't get that going, then, and I'm not saying that your body's not able to utilize the nutrients on a cellular level without oils. What I am saying is that each one of us has at least 10 million different variations. We don't know which ones are working, and at any given time, we could be affected by something in the air that we don't even smell. And it's going to cause a chemical shift in our system. So incorporating the oils, because they are 100% active ingredients, there's no inactive ingredients, there's no fillers, you're doing your body a world of good. And I'm going to cover that in my next video when it comes to talking about why I want the oils included in people's lives and why I'm such a big proponent of oils in people's lives, because it's far more than medicine. And I look forward to visiting with you then. I look forward to hearing from you. Please let me know what questions you have. And until then, have an absolutely blessed and beautiful day. Bye now.